Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we will be using AI to edit a landscape in Darktable. Now, I will show you for those who suffer from what they call the fear of missing out, that the artificial intelligence masking that's available in other software will not do a better job than in Darktable. And in Darktable, not only will you be using your brain, which is always pleasant, and that is creative and it's something we can really engage with. But with the tools are better. You have more control over what we're doing. So full landscape edit coming up. I'm Nicholas, and let's do this together. So this is the photo we are going to edit. For the moment, it's looking quite dull. Just before starting, I had some suggestions in the comments of previous episodes that the red circle around the pointer was a bit useless, but it would be better if I had a higher contrast menu system screen, if you like. So I'm trying that today, and let me know in the comments if it's working for you. I would not work with these very dark colors. In general, I find them kind of quite tiring, but if it works for the video, then it works for me. So I'm going to be very organized with this edit. I'm going to first of all do some basic edits, and then we want to analyze the photo and have a look at what we're doing. So it was taken at sunset. I know it doesn't look like that, but the sun was setting. The colors were actually quite vivid. The reds were flamboyant in the trees, and the photo for the moment looks very flat, not at all like how I remember it anyway. We're going to try and bring some pop back into the photo. Now, there are two ways of doing that in a landscape. Um, well, the first thing is the tree. You see, the tree is the subject, and the tree, we want to get these reds back, some brighter colors. We want it to detach better from the uh, the sky at least, and maybe the background. But also, don't forget, and this is in the way the eye, the brain sees color, is that what we see is just as much a function of the actual color of the object as of that of the surrounding colors. So we're going to have to do a lot of work on this sky to make the tree stand out against it. And I think that is a lesson we can use in a lot of our photos. Anyway, let's start. First of all, a few basic corrections. I'm going to do lens correction, denoise. I'm going to go into color RGB and just the basic colors here. So basic, standard colors, not much changed there. I want to use sigmoid today. So let's go into sigmoid. I like using sigmoid for landscapes. We have, so let's try and get some information out of this photo. So maybe if I try and get information out of the highlights, there we are. Here we are. See, that's changing the highlights. If I push the skew backwards, you see that I'm actually losing contrast. This what's it called? This scope gives me the balance of colors in the red, green, and blue channels, and the actual the top here is the white point. So if we move the contrast up, we're actually going out, and if we go right to the top, we're kind of reaching the clipping point, which sigmoid won't let us do. At least we're getting some bright colors back in the image. We'll see about kind of differentiating all the contrasts after. I suggest we give ourselves already quite a wide margin. I'm going to remove a little bit of the preserve hue because we know that in sunset colors, then preserve hue, and I've already done a video on this, will give me some false colors, but we can always play around with this later. And that's all I'm going to do in these first modules. Maybe just a bit of rotate and rotate the photo, make the horizon, or at least the ground, a little bit more horizontal. And I had a comment in the previous video that you can be anywhere, just right click and just stretch your mouse, and that will just do rotation. So it's something I don't use very often because often I have to realign the verticals, um, kind of in towns and street photos. But on the landscape, it's easy, quick to do. Thanks for the tip. and let's start the proper editing now. So I think the first thing we need to do now is try and get a little bit of pop in the reds here in the tree, and it's the easiest mask to make. So as I explained in the previous video, I'm going to make all my masks in kind of fake exposure modules, and that enable me to reuse the masks as well later on the pipeline as raster masks. Now I would like to be able to do them in the mask manager, but here in the mask manager I can only make vector masks and I can't have access to parametric masks. Now I know there are reasons for that. The main one being that the parametric masks will be different depending on where you are in the pipeline. That is, if you've changed luminosities or colors, then the parameters will change. I would like an area to prepare the masks, and what I'm doing is a bit of a workaround. So right click here to get um, a new instance of exposure, and then control click on the title here, which is a tip I learned recently, and you can just type in the name. So I'm going to type in a tree highlights, highlights. And that is important for me to have a good name there because that's the name of the future raster mask. So I want a drawn and parametric mask. I'm going to do a rough circle around the tree. Now, I'm not too bothered about the bottom of the tree because I'm not going to try and make that stand out too much because that would be very unrealistic. It'd be very difficult to do, but also I think that the tree kind of does naturally blend into some of the bushes behind, and I don't think that's what we need to change. So I have a mask. I'm not too bothered about the feathering because everything's inside, and I want to choose some hues, and I'll also choose also with the brightnesses to eliminate the sky. So M for mask, and let's try and get rid of the sky behind, just so that I'm going the wrong way, aren't I? Just sky behind, sorry. Trying to concentrate a bit here, and so we can get, maybe I'll include a little bit more. Okay, there we are. So I'm eliminating the sky behind. Now we'll work out the details after. And this is what I'm talking about when I talk about automatic selecting. The tree is a very, very difficult mask to make. Um, I mean, by hand it'd be impossible. AI doesn't work very well. And Darktable, well, it does work, but it takes a bit of thinking to get this done. So now hues, I'm actually going to select the reds. And if I move the sliders here and I'm eliminating them. So I'm going to inverse the polarity of that so nothing is selected. And then I can select the reds here and select the reds and the yellows and get some of those colours back. Now, I'm not too bothered about getting everything because what I want to do is give a bit of pop to the highlights really of the tree. So there we have something like that. Uh, Maybe I'm going to eliminate everything that's not already colourful. I just want to add some pop to already poppy colours. And now we need to work about how much feathering I want to do. Now I'll zoom in. I will zoom in to 200% on the mask so we can see what we're doing. Let's go up here in this corner here and have a look at the mask. So I want to make sure that I'm selecting all the bright colours. I'll add a little bit of feathering. You see the effect feathering has, which is already quite immediate. Did that go away? That'll do. Blurring, you see, if I push that up, it'll blur out into the sky, so I don't particularly want that. And mask opacity, if I want to leave some parts alone. No, I don't want to touch everything, you see, I just want to add some colours to colours that already exist there, so that's not too bad. Uh, Bit. I actually moved the mouse wheel while I was doing that. There, so I have some colours. That is the kind of brighter colours um, on the tree. That's kind of a decent mask. So I could use exposure on this. I mean, I didn't use the exposure module to make the mask, but I could, you see. And here I'm increasing the brightness there. So I do actually get a little bit back. But that's not the module I want to use on that, actually. I want to use the color equalizer. Now, you'd say if I only wanted the color equalizer, why didn't I make the mask in the color equalizer? Well, the answer to that, sorry, I mean, at the risk of repeating myself, is that if ever I change my mind and I want to add, let's say, a tone equalizer on the same part or any other module, and it's not made in the lowest module in the pipeline, then I don't have access to the raster mask. So I always make all my masks in the exposure, the lowest one, and I can reuse raster masks after. So here I'm going to go to raster mask, no mask use. I'm going to choose exposure tree highlights. So here I have the mask, the exact one I had before, and I am going to increase the saturation in the reds. Now I don't have to measure colours, I know these are reds. Let's see how that looks. And you can see there's already quite a difference there if I go on and off. There we are. You can see that already. And maybe the brightness also just in these colours. And now I've got some really popping reds here. That's fine for me. Uh, not blending well with the image for the moment because I haven't added extra pop to the rest. It looks a bit artificial. I assure you it will blend in. So that is um, kind of, well, the first thing I want to do is with the tree. Now let's go back to exposure and right click on that, control click on the title, and we'll do tree global. There, so I'm going to try and select as much of the tree as I can. Um, so let's do drawn and parametric. Let's make a nice mask around the tree here. There we are. That should do. I don't really need any feathering, although I could do with um, blending this mask. I'll show you what I mean by adding some feather just to the bottom, kind of. That's just to feather out the selection. Oh, I didn't get the feather there. There, I've got it there. You see, so that any changes I make will be gradually lost on the lower part of the tree, because well, the lower part of the tree is going to stay quite dark and hidden, which seems natural to me. And the top part is where I'm going to get all the transformations. Now, if that isn't gradual enough, what we can do is add a gradient, kind of a gradient halfway through. And I'm going to increase the feathering on that. And then in the mask manager, I go tree global and right click on gradient and do intersection. And that will give me a nice gradient out in the mask. There we have something like that. And the other path, I'm actually not sure we need to keep that feathering. I think I'd rather make it too big. And there we are, we're using, it's more gradual, you see, if I use the intersection with a gradient mask. Now, that is the drawn mask part. Now for the parametric. So we want to keep the tree. So that means we want to eliminate all the highlights. So let's go on down. Something like previously, really. Well, we're going down about here and feathering out. There we are. And I want to make sure that I've got the right hues. So let's invert that. Let's include some of the reds and yellows and greens. Now, particularly want to add any blues because I don't want to get the sky back in for any good reason. And Now what I need to do is kind of refine that so that I get nice edges around. Let's zoom in again. Zoom in 200%. Go to this upper part here and let's feather. Now I can right click on feather and I can add the feather very gently here. Now, to catch all the tree and the small branches, you see we're doing quite well there. Get the tree and the small branches. I'm actually not getting any sky still. I think we're doing quite well there. Let's check in another part. If I switch the mask off and on, now there are some small parts. I can zoom in. Uh, see there. I need to zoom in. You need to be in a place where you're not on 1,600%. Let's give that a go. So look at the mask on and off, and this shouldn't be selected, you see. I need a little bit more gap there. Do less. Oh, there we are. Yeah, I was doing quite well, and that was masking too much. So now I'm going to use the opacity. You see, now if I get the feathering up and the opacity down, then I'm actually getting some things back, but I'm losing some edges. So if I decrease the contrast, improve, increase the feathering, can I just touch a bit of blurring? No, it's too much. So this is all very fine, and I think actually we're not too bad. I think we'll do very much better. There's nothing selected here. I think we're doing quite well. Now this is what I said by the amount of control we have on the masking. It's quite incredible. I have an excellent selection here. I was looking at it at 1,600%, which is ludicrous. But even at that level, I am actually getting everything I want. Now, I don't want to um, do anything with the tree exposure. So make sure that for the tree global, I have nothing. And I will, however, go into the tone equalizer here, right click on the blank spot above here, kind of next to tone equalizer, tree global, give it the same name if it's the same mask. And I'll do raster mask, choose the raster mask I want, no mask, there it is. Tree global, make sure it's that one. Yes, it is. And we can use the mask compensation, which is now on the same screen in version 5.1, which is useful. No messing around with tabs. And let's get a bit of information. So where am I? I'm in between these nodes. I'm going from one part of the screen here. I'm exploring the tree and looking here where my tones are. So it's all this zone here. So basically, if you want to add contrast, you have to brighten some, darken the others. If it's all too dark, then we could just brighten some and brighten more the others, which is not particularly what I want to do. Maybe the very dark part of the tree could be lifted. That's giving me a little bit more information around here. And the bright parts, it's useless because they aren't in the tree at all. So before that tree is coming on, there's not much actually I can do or I want to do to that tree. Maybe globally after I might lift all the darks in the image. But for the moment, we could do that now. Right. So right click. I'm not giving a name to that because it's global. Get the mask and maybe just lift the dark a little bit in the image. Like you see, is a global adjustment. There we are. Okay. So if we want to look at where we were and where we are, I have a shortcut, so it's Shift H for me to compress the history stack. And if we go to where we started, so just with sigmoid rotate and perspective, and there we are. So before any local edits, we were there, and now we've actually changed the tree, and that is coming out a little bit now. Well, let's work on the sky. Right, let's make a new instance of exposure. So right click on the button there, left control click on the name, and we'll call this sky. Now to make a sky, it's mainly a parametric mask. We'll see if we need a drawn gradient or something after. And usually it's a question of brightness. So we'll click on M and we'll move up slowly until we start losing some of the sky. Now I know for a fact that we'll lose the top corner here. And if you lose the mask, press on M again. At one point, see a change in the top corner. Right, when we get to about there, I'll move the boost factor up and kind of carry on. Sometimes you lose the mask. Press on M. Oh, there we're losing the corner. So that is a hard stop, which needs to be there. Now the soft stop will just diminish the opacity, but that is not a problem for the moment. But I'm going to use it to control what's happening in the tree. There. So I need to keep the branches that are visible. I need to keep those kind of unselected. It's actually not bad what I've got here. It looks quite good. I'm going to use the feathering, so right click, because usually I don't need a lot of feathering. A bit. Feather a bit. Have somewhere in the middle there. I don't know if I need more opacity. I'm a bit afraid that'll give me hard edges. I could combine opacity, get a little bit more opacity with a little bit less contrast. And that might give me some nice soft edges that are bleeding over, but not too far. Make sure everything is selected. Now you see, I don't need any other kind of mask. I do seem to have just the sky. Oh no, I do have some selected here. I'm going to just make a quick gradient. Kind of there. And that gets rid of any of the bright colours we have. Here the sunlight was hitting that part there. So now we have a selection of the sky. Let's work on that. I'm going to do something that might seem a little bit strange, is I'm going to duplicate this instance. And I'll make a new instance, let's say. I'm going to call this Sky 2. So the first instance of exposure is just to get the mask. The work I'm doing is on this instance here, and I'm going to choose, obviously, exposure sky. And if I look at the mask, well, I have the mask there. Now, what is new, coming up soon is I have now the mask refinement on raster masks. So I can actually increase the opacity of that if I want to kind of do something a bit dramatic. There we are, which is kind of different to then if I'd moved the opacity on the previous ones. It's it's kind of starting over. It doesn't seem to give exactly the same results. But what it's enabling me to do anyway is to preserve the first mask and kind of get a bit more opacity on this one if I want to do something a bit dramatic, which is what I want to do now. Because what I want to do is multiply. Mode, here we are, normal, multiply, and that will give me some drama. Yeah. Opacity. Yeah. So let's move the fulcrum down. Oh, see where we are. Okay, so actually, by moving the fulcrum up on that and the exposure down, we can actually get some detail out of the sky. It's all about playing with the tones there. Seeing if I put the opacity to where it was, and I'm actually losing a little bit. No, just move that up a little bit. And the contrast down. Uh, Fulcrum, move it quite high. Now I need to do a lot more work on this sky to get it out, don't I? Because I'm getting a little bit of detailed out. That's where I was. That's where I am now. Now maybe I could, while I'm at it, get a new instance of tone equalizer. So we'll call this sky. We'll go straight to exposure sky, make the mask compensation better. Now we know the sky is all this part here. We do have some variations from the first part to the last. So we can actually get kind of a line there. But the idea is to get something steep. And the steeper it is, the more local or the more contrast you're getting. And as it's a mask, it's kind of a bit localized. That is before and after. So we're getting something back. Okay. Now, do I want to add some colors to it? Maybe I could in the sky also, which will be very good for us, is to have the contrast equalizer here. So I'm going to control click, type in the name sky, that contrast equalizer, and I'm going to add something coarse in the luma, which is going to add kind of very coarse clarity, which is fine in a sky. Now it's doing it all over the image there, of course, because I haven't chosen the raster mask. So raster mask, exposure sky, and before and after. So I'm getting some detail, the clouds you see, those very large details, they're coming out, and maybe a little bit of in the color equalizer. You see, so you see now I've got the idea I was going for is now I've got the raster mask for the sky, and I can use loads and loads of modules, and I have the same mask, nothing to worry about. Saturation. Okay, what if I move the blues up a bit? Come on, what's that doing before and after? That's not bad. I don't want to move it too far up. I mean, I suppose it's this slider here. Not too far, just give us some nice blues and brightness. Well, up or down. Quite honestly, the contrast is coming when I'm moving down. Now we'll have to see about the saturation. I'm going to reduce the saturation a little bit. So we have now a clear idea of the sunlight. I mean, the blue sky is here. This is called a bit wishy-washy and blown out. That is because the sunlight was coming through here, and I've kind of lost the colours of that. So that is what I'm going to recreate now, is kind of the sunlight coming through the branches. Now let's make another exposure module here, another instance. I'm going to duplicate the sky, not sky 2, which is a raster mask, but the original sky. So let's duplicate that. We'll control click here and call it sun. And so for the moment, this is the mask. I'm going to remove the shape I used, which is the gradient, because I don't need that anymore. And I'm going to replace that by an ellipse. I've already prepared this, you see, I've done this before, which is kind of with a wide feather. I'm going to put in somewhere kind of a little bit over the tree, and we can give it a bigger kind of fall off there. That's about where we're going. So I want this light here to kind of resemble sunlight a little bit better. So I'm still only illuminating the sky. And so for the moment, nothing in exposure. I just want to change the colors. And to change the colors, I'm going to duplicate the color calibration. So new instance, we'll call this sun. And if you don't want an error because you're using it twice, then we could actually use a mask. We could actually use two masks. We'll call this not sun, and I could use raster mask and use exposure sun and invert that. And normally I get in the parts that are not lit by the sun, the normal color calibration, and in the parts that are illuminated by the sun, and this avoids having color calibration applied twice on each or on several pixels. We'll use exposure sun, which is just that part there. And now we can go wild with the colors. Now I want to get some sunshine. So most of this is blues. We can check where we are if you like. Now, if you're not sure how to use the this color calibration matrix of RGB in and out, I did a whole video on that. If you look down the playlist, um, these are quite great. We have blues. So I'm sure we have a little bit more information in the blues. I'm sure by using the input blue, we'll get quicker results. So I want a bit more red. Let's go a little bit wild, and everything's turning a little bit pinky there. And green, leave that for the moment, and the blues will bring down. Should introduce some interesting yellows. There we are. Right, not too bad. We can play with greens. So you can have more or less. I think we're okay at one. It's not too bad. Now this is something you can work on. You leave the computer, come back, make sure it looks okay. In the sun, I could increase the colourfulness of red. Maybe get a little bit interesting going on. I have some magentas up here. I can either work on or leave them as kind of artifacts. I could change this here. I could make the spread a little bit wider. I could work on this and kind of make a bit of cyan in the sky here if I wanted to. Color equalizer. I could turn the blues a little bit pinky there, you see. I can work on that to blend them in if I want to. There we are, maybe like that there. I have a better blend from the sunlight to the sky. Now what I could also do is go into color RGB. I haven't used that very much so far. So new instance, right, control click, and we'll call this sky, raster mask, sky. And now I can get a bit more of a sun effect, maybe by increasing the brightness and lowering the midtones. Now I don't have any midtones here, it all seems to be highlight. Now there is something I can do about that. Go into the masks, let's go into the highlights, see what highlights are. Hello? Okay, that's not working. Oh, here we are. Highlights. And if I find what highlights are, I can move a little grey. There we are. So I'm introducing some highlights into there. So now, see if I look at the midtones, I have a few midtones. No, there's less of them there. A few midtones, very few midtones, and some highlights. If I move midtones down, there we are. I see now I've got some. That's too much, obviously. But now I've differentiated the midtones from the highlights in this module. There we are. So that gives me a bit of extra punch in the sky. Right, now that's not too bad. If you want to work on the colours, you can also use RGB primaries in the sun. Yeah, higher exposure sun, and you could play around with a few. Let's see in the reds, that's a bit more yellow, that's a bit more kind of reddy. That's not too bad actually. I think that's not bad. You can reduce or increase the purity there, but I think I want to increase it. I think that's actually not too bad as things stand for the moment. So that is kind of introducing some sunlight, and that is quite dramatic. Maybe over the top for some of you, but if I go back to where we were before and now introduce the sun, that is kind of making the whole lot for me anyway, come to life. Right, now let's do a bit of tidy component cleaning up before we finish this image. Right, now some quick fixes. Let's go back down to exposure and have another instance. So right click there, control click here, and we'll put ND grad. And this is just a quick ND, which I will put on the bottom of the image. Now I want to obviously invert the shape just to show you. I've just got kind of a mask there, and I'm just lowering the exposure there on the first grasses, just to close the bottom of the image down. And equally, I'm going to do this in exposure as well. So exposure, right click, new instance, control click, and I'm going to do mid grasses. I'm going to use the double gradient trick. So one gradient which is below the strip of grasses. These are the mid grasses here. So one below and another one above, but inverted. And if I go into the mask manager, now mid grasses group and intersect the two, then I have, uh, where's the mask? Come on, mask. There we are. I have a double gradient, which gives me a bar, just a strip in the middle of the image. And I'm going to remove in the parametric mask the darker colors. There we are. So I just have kind of a strip in the center, a little bit of feathering on there, just so we get where I want to be. And those, maybe just increase the exposure just a little bit, and maybe also go into the color equalizer. So let's duplicate that, control click mid grasses, and maybe I'm going to increase yellows there. Uh, now I could do this in color RGB too. Maybe I should have no, choose the mask mid grasses there. Just add some color there. I mean, transform the hue, kind of get this looking like some sunlight there. So we have before and after. Well, that's not too bad. I've blended in a little bit of color there, just to make kind of get a bit of depth in the photo. So dark, light, and we get the different, the front and the middle and the back. And for the back, I think I will use a module I don't use a lot, the haze removal, dehaze. Use this very much. I don't either use these kind of brushes very much either. That is what I'm going to do. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Let's get a brush. I'm going to control click on that, just so I can have several brushes. Get one with low opacity. I'm just going to go over the parts that I want to fade out in the background and go over roughly. Here. Let's look at the mask there, which is not looking too good, but it's always better when you have a parametric mask and we can work out what's working. Oh, it's thinking about that now, isn't it? What are you thinking about? Right, I'll have to start again there. Working and working. Oh, there we are. We have it there. So it's quite dark, bit of feathering. Let's get rid of the bottom part there. Maybe I could just choose some tonalities there in the middle. Not changing too much. Well, you'll see it doesn't really matter for the mask. Um, what's happening here is I'm actually dehazing. So I'm going to use haze backwards and just fade these out just a little bit there. See the trees in the distance. That is after, or before and after. That's before and that is after. So they've pushed those back, kind of a bit of haze there. And well, I could remove, there are two birds here. I could remove those, but I'm not too bothered at the moment. I mean, they do look a bit like dust spots, so maybe they would need to be removed for a print. But just to finish this quick, because the video has been going on quite a long time, now for some diffuse and sharpen. Now here's the fun. I'm going to, contrary to what I might usually do, is I'm going to use some bloom. Now bloom, that's what bloom does. It kind of diffuses everything. Now I don't want to diffuse the whole image. I would like to diffuse maybe just a corner here, top of the tree, maybe with some very light opacity. So let's go there. Let's curve. I'm pressing on Command here. The curve, just to make sure I'm not touching the trees at the bottom there. Make sure they're not affected, because that would look strange. And uh, before and after, so that's just cutting off. There we are, the important things there. Now there's something I hadn't seen. There's something wrong with one of the masks. There is a bit of cleaning up in the masks to do. So I'd have to go back and examine that. Uh, where would I be in the sky? Hmm, Sky. There's one of the masks which would need reworking, I think. Uh, can't be in the tree, so it has to be the sky. I'd have to rework the sky mask a bit to get rid of that. Um, Now, the advantage of reworking stuff is that if I change a mask here in exposure, then I am also no, we need to put that- alright. Then if I do that, what I mean to say is that um, all the masks will automatically change. So I just have a slight problem there to solve. A conundrum. I didn't have this the first times I made the image. Maybe I do that a little bit. Let's see if that's better. Well, not really. There's something going on. Oh, I should be careful with that. Anyway, I can sort that out. As I said, didn't do it the first time or the second time I did the photo. I'd have to be careful about that. That needs reworking. Otherwise, what we can do is a bit of sharpening. I'm going to finish this. New instance, we'll do no AA filter for sharpen demosaicing. New instance, and we can have a bit of sharpening with medium lens deblur, and then essentially that's finished. So there we are. So we still have a little bit of work to do. Now I did the masks much quicker here than what I would do. I'm sure I can work out these details a little bit better in the tree here, just to make sure the colours are fine. There is a little bit of work you can do. Now what I'd like to show you is how Lightroom sorts masks out, and you'll see that well, Darktable is at least just as good. Oh, I forgot to do the global before and after. This is what we want. So let's go. It's always fun. Go down to this one, color equalizer. That is before kind of all the global adjustments have been made, nothing local. So let's take a snapshot of that. Take a snapshot, and then in the history, go to the topmost part. That is the latest one, and now we can look before and after. And by the way, I was looking at this thinking that there's a problem with the masking, but actually, there isn't. I think it's fine. It's just that the leaves here are bare. Mm, I don't like it when details go wrong. But you see the tree here. See, we do have some kind of funny leaves there. Uh, I don't think there's very much wrong with the mask in there. Yeah. Anyway, that is the before and after, folks, and that is how you do masking. Well, at least how I do masking in Darktable. I'm sure there are many other ways to do it. Now here we have, I've gone back to the exposure tree global mask. This is the mask I had made of the tree. So it did take me a bit of time to make that. This is the one-click mask that Lightroom makes. So what I've done is I've increased the exposure just to see what we have left of the tree. And as you see, there is quite a bit of detail that hasn't picked up in the tree. We're kind of losing quite a lot. Now, does it matter? I don't know. But although the one-click AI masking is good, brilliant, I don't know what words you want to use in Lightroom, it certainly is not complete, and this needs work on it. And it needs work with parametric masks. It needs work adjusting the brightness, the colors. And I'm sorry to say, but the tools in Darktable are so much more refined to do that. So um, if you think you're missing out, then I can assure you that, well, for me at least, you're not. This is the general selection of the sky. It's a sky selection, really. And this is the 400 or 800 maybe percent uh, view. And you see, we're losing. If you increase the sky there, we are losing a lot of the leaves and small branches, which we are not losing here in Darktable. Anyway, it's not to criticise at all. That's not what I want to mean. What I mean is that we have the tools to do exactly what we want in Darktable. We don't need anything else. Anyway, that's the end of the rant. Well, I hope you enjoyed this rather long, rather in depth tutorial on landscape and masking, and I'll see you all next time. Ta then.